Hi guys, Ren here and welcome to the workshop. I'm sure you already know my road bike, the S-Works Venge. Unfortunately, it wasn't kept in one piece for long because I've sold the wheels and I decided to change the group set to 12 speed. And I was waiting for it for a long time. Although, to be honest, I had the group set already, but the new power meters from Quark aren't really all the, easily available, so I had to wait for that. So let's just have a look of what we have here. As a side note, I had the 11-speed eTap HRD on this bike, which is now for sale. And to make my life easier, what I've done is I've left the lever holding brackets on the bar. I just unscrewed the lever. I left the brake hoses routed all the way because the new levers and brakes use exactly the same type of hose. So the worst part of the job is actually routing the hoses. So now it should be pretty quick. And I've already changed the BB30 bottom bracket with the GXP adapters to Kogel ceramic dub style bottom bracket to fit the new type of crank axle that SRAM now use. So yeah, the rest of the system of course is completely wireless, being SRAM eTap. So yeah, should be a very easy setup. First, let's start with the chain. This is SRAM's new top of the line flat top chain. And I had this already waxed, as you can see. Of course, I'm still going to continue using molten speed wax on my chains to keep the drivetrain fresh and fast. Then let's continue with the cassette. This is the new XG1290 cassette, which uses a very similar one-piece design to the cassettes of the older Red generation. So it's machined from billet steel, and then the largest cog is made in aluminum and pressed on top. The difference, of course, is that because of the 10-tooth small cog, this now uses, instead of a traditional lock ring style setup, it's a one-piece unit, completely one piece, with a thread-on style cassette to fit the XDR driver. So that's a bit different, although it uses the same tool. But of course you need a wheel that fits this type of free hub. But that's not a problem because SRAM has it licensed to basically every wheel manufacturer out there. Then the cranks. If you've seen my previous video that I've done at the launch, I was very frustrated with the new power meter because it had basically all the electronics bound to one chainring. So if you wear out or you want to change the chainring, you have to throw out your power meter as well. But SRAM has the option of this so-called gravel power meter, which still has a separate spider with a separate chainring, so that's good news. The bad news is that this chainring comes only until the size of 46. Now you think that may be a huge problem, and it's not ideal, I have to admit. But the thing is, if you calculate 46 by 10 as my top gear with a tire like 25, it's pretty much the same as a 5011, so it's not too bad, although not the greatest for efficiency. But I already have one of my partners in the works to manufacture larger chainrings for this style of setup to fit the new tooth profiles for the narrower chain, and also the new BCD which SRAM have done, of course, to prevent aftermarket options. Now I'm working on avoiding that, so stay tuned if you want to see more about that. Yeah, also worth noting that it's a 1x setup. I'm going to continue using the 1x setup. With 12 gears at the back, it's going to be even easier and more universal. I've already mentioned the dub style spindle, and this pretty much makes for the lightest crank that SRAM make to date. It's lighter than BB30, much lighter than GXP steel axles. Although, yeah, because of the separate chainring, it's not as light as, for example, the integrated chainrings. But that's not that much of an issue for me. I prefer to have more options. And then, of course, the group set itself I've already installed a TT version of this group set on a customer's bike, but this is actually the first time I see the hydraulic levers in the flesh. So let's have a look. Yeah, this uses pretty much the same lever shape as the previous levers, slightly updated shift pedal, slightly updated texture on the hood, but otherwise very similar. As I said, the brake hose is exactly the same, so yeah, very easy to retrofit on my current setup. The caliper underwent some slight changes, but still very similar in design, although the finish is quite different. Yeah, so that's the caliper and the brake. This is a 1x setup, so no front Mack to show off just yet. But let's have a look at the rear Mack, if I manage to get it out of the box. Yeah, here it is. So as you can see, pretty long cage. The design is quite strikingly different to the previous model, and now it uses the fluid clutch retention system, so theoretically no chain device needed. Okay, so let's go. Oh, the battery here, of course, same as every eTap AXS style shifting from SRAM, so I have plenty of those now. For my other bikes, this is the rear brake. And what I don't really get is, why do you get rotors with these group sets? Because, well, with eTap HRD you get center lock rotors, now you get 6-bolt rotors. It's this new aero style of rotor, 160mm on both sides. I use 160-140, so one of these is redundant. Yeah, I think it's a weird choice because they can't really know what rotor are you going to use on your bike, and it's not even the popular 160-140. You can use 140-140 for cyclocross or if you're a super light rider, so I think this point of the group set doesn't really make sense because it's just better to buy the rotors you need separately. Okay, that's all it comes in terms of parts. Now let's build the bike up and see how the group set performs. Okay, the group set has been on now for more than a week, and I've tried to do as many kilometers on it as possible to be able to get you some first impressions. I have to say my feelings after a couple of rides are very positive indeed. I can tell you straight up that it's not a revolution in terms of eTap, but it's a nice evolution and it's improved in many ways. So let's start at the front of the bike as usual with the levers. Now, installation was pretty straightforward, although not as straightforward as I wanted to, because they use a different clamp that you can't fit from the previous eTap, so I had to undo the bar tape, undo the blips, and put it on like normal. I couldn't use my little cheat that I wanted, but the hoses fit exactly in the same spot and exactly in the same way, same type, so that's very neat. The bleed system or the bleed procedure exactly the same, very simple, excellent. The SRAM bleed kit is, well, second to none, I think. Then the levers themselves, this new hood cover, I think it's more grippy, more pleasant to hold. I was riding in wet conditions as well. I think it's a big improvement. The lever shape is exactly the same. The pedals also have a little more texture, and the click itself is a little bit more tactile, even more audible, so it's not a huge improvement. The previous version was very good as well, but this one is improved. So riding in winter gloves, etc. will not be a problem at all. The finish, I think, is very subdued and very beautiful, this chrome with the bare carbon. The blips are exactly the same, working exactly the same way. You just plug them into the lever hood right here and you're set up. So no big changes here. If you're frustrated with Di2, that you can't really feel what's going on with the buttons, then well, this is the obvious choice, because here it's just impossible to miss with this almost rifle click like action. Further down the bike, I can mention crankset. And if you remember my previous video, this was my biggest problem with AXS, the new gearing and the incompatibility, but mainly the fact that the chainring is integrated into the power meter into one unit. Here it's not the case. Some people pointed out, why did I not go for the force crank? Well, you can have the same style of crank in Red version, and that's much lighter, so why would I go for force? The biggest chainring you can get in this version, this is a 1x non-aero version if you're looking for it, is a 46, which arguably is not ideal, but I've been riding on it for a while and I have to be honest, it's not really bad. It partly comes down to my tire choice, because many people don't recognize this, but the size of your tire greatly affects your final gear ratio. And since this tire measures, well, it's almost 30 millimeters tall, the gearing also is going to be much taller with the same setup, like if I had a 23 or 25. So subsequently, this is a 46 to the front, with a 10 tooth cog at the back, of course, but still it's pretty much equivalent to a 5211 with a standard 25mm tire, so that's pretty good. People have been also asking about chainline efficiency. As you know, I'm a big fan of pursuing gains in the drivetrain in this regard on the time trial bike. On the road bike, I think it's different, because in a TT you know your threshold more or less, that's the power you're going to ride in, and you know your aerodynamics, drag, etc. So you can quite accurately guess what speed are you going to travel at, so you can guess the gearing and the chainline efficiency for that speed. On the road bike though, I don't think it's possible, because in a race you can go cruising in zone 2 and you can go full on attack at 500-600 watts or even more for a couple of seconds or minutes. So it's, you know, it's too much variance. So I think here range is more important than actually guessing the correct ratio. Of course, it also applies here that the bigger chaining is going to be more efficient. The 46 is not huge by any means, but still, as I said, the top gear with this tire is good, and well, the bottom gear, I haven't even touched that. It's super low, so yeah, I don't have any long steep climbs here, but in case you encounter them with this setup, you're going to be fine, because I think you can go down to 10 kilometers per hour in a comfortable cadence. So that's good. Also, the finish of the cranks, I really like that. It's beautiful, and I really like the new dub spindle. It's light, it's compatible with everything except, well, Trek's unlucky BB90, but yeah, that's a bit annoying for me because I have 3 Trek bikes. Other than that, really satisfied. Installation, everything creak free, no problems whatsoever. Power meter works as expected. I have to be honest, when I first saw the new Quark design and this cap, I thought it's going to be rechargeable, but well, it's not. If you remove this little rubber cover, it's exactly the same battery and battery cover as previously. This is more or less, I think, for weatherproofing, because the D0 is an excellent power meter. In my experience, I had many with no problems. Yeah, and the only kind of weak spot was the battery cover. So I think this little redesign makes that even more robust, and it looks quite cool too, to be honest. Then for the rear Mack, shifting wise, excellent. A lot snappier shifting than previously. Also, we got good chain retention. As you can see, I'm not running a chain guard. no chain drops so far, even though I tried it on pretty rough roads, cobbles even. So yeah, everything works as it should. If I spin the pulley wheels, they also seem to be pretty friction free. Also not ceramic speed, but yeah, pretty good. And the chain, I also really like the new chain design, and I've noticed that, for example, it holds the wax on itself a lot better than the previous one with the shiny nickel coating. This one is a bit different. And yeah, even though I was riding in full-on rain for 2.5 hours, the coating stayed on, so that's nice. And I don't think I can say that about the previous SRAM chain, so that might be worth considering. Cassettes, easy to install. I think they're using the same all steel construction as previously, so yeah, they're going to be super sturdy, super long lasting, so no problems whatsoever. Braking action, more or less the same as previously, which fair to say is excellent. I get a bit of a tingle from the front brake when I got to the saddle and sprint, but it needs some more adjustment. It was just a quick initial setup, so that can be fixed in no time. Okay, so I think that's all about SRAM AXS for me for now. I already have one of my partners working on a different chainring, so I think those will be the first aftermarket chainring options for this bolt circle. And I'm also looking to fit the new style of chainring to all the cranks, so I can use them on the tracks. It will be much easier for me compatibility wise, so stay tuned for that. And also I will be doing a follow-up video a bit later on about the bike itself and about the group set as well. That's all for today. Thanks for watching and see you next time.